All right, hello everyone. I know we got the after lunch slot here. We're going to keep it lively and try and engage you here. So in terms of the question, I'd like to provide just a little bit of context. The energy transition is probably the biggest thing that humans will do. It's the biggest thing we've done to date. My view of the world comes from my background in electrical engineering. I'm a power engineer, have been for a very long time in a number of different areas, and we'll get into that a little bit later. And also, I've tried to figure out a way that we can incorporate the regulatory compact, which really says, how do we look at reliability and cost in balance, knowing that that balance is continuously changing because the fulcrum is continuously changing due to a number of things like technology and so on. So in terms of decarbonization, really looking to kind of maybe impart the fact that we need to keep our innovators and entrepreneurs in a good space. We need to encourage not only them, but also the structures that support them, and also looking for the balance between how do we then innovate in such a way that we balance the energy systems, because if we start taking natural gas at the residential level, moving it to electricity, now we've burdened the electricity system with potentially something it can handle, but maybe something it can't. So this is an important aspect for me.
Thanks, Rob. You'll have time to expand more, but very quick, what does innovation mean to you?
Innovation for the Center for Innovation in Clean Energy is really hard tech innovation or a business model innovation. I see Robbie's here. So how you use existing technology for different application or adaptation as far as what the needs of your end customer are. Short, sweet.
Very sweet. Haley?
I think of innovation as the unrelenting drive to break status quo. I think we all have something in common here today. I don't think any of us get out of bed for incremental innovation. We're here for creative destruction.
Nice.
Big and bold ideas.
Pardon?
Big and bold ideas.
I thought you said baseball diamonds.
It's my screwed up accent. Sorry, everyone.
Well, that was very short and sweet. Thank you. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to each panelist to give a little presentation. Same order, and you're welcome to sit here or go up to the podium, whatever you're most comfortable with. I know a couple of you have some slides, so we're going the same order. Rob first. You have some slides, right?
Yeah, a couple slides.
Do you want to stay there or stand?
I'm going to walk with this.
Perfect. Do a little among the crowd.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do that. That's part of keeping this thing lively today, so you never know what's going to come behind you. So, pardon? This is great. So, in terms of the presentation here today, it's going to be, I think we got 5 or 6 minutes or something like that, put it together. And whenever you're ready with the presentation, I'd just like to say, as we're bringing up the slides here, this is an exciting time. It's an exciting time for everybody that's here.
Your blinker's on the stage there.
My which? I guess that would be on me. There we go. Exciting times. So we've got lots of things happening at the moment here. I'm sure that anybody in this room could get up right now and spend 8 hours up there saying all the things that they're thinking about and still be able to have gas for tomorrow. So this is an interesting time in our evolution as an industry, and I guess maybe the way that we're doing things for really the civilization that we're working with here. For those of you who don't know me, nothing is short and sweet, unlike the other 3 panelists who actually got the thing out quickly and I didn't. So I'm a power engineer, transmission planner, started in the early 1990s. I'm a utility person 8 years in, and then came to Alberta and worked with the Alberta Electric System Operator, helped set it up in 1998, which was kind of innovation in a way that was, at the time, pretty edgy by today's standards, maybe not so much. But it was a big move. It was a big move in the industry. What it attempted to do is open up wholesale markets right across North America. Following that, I did about 15 years of consulting, international consulting within Canada, Europe and the US mainly. And the idea that I was trying to formulate at the time And anybody who's been in the industry for about 15 years would know that even if you knew it or not, you were actually doing energy transition at that time. And so as we started to move the system, started to change energy balance, all of these things took place in a way that was maybe a little bit silent, but now has turned into a little bit of a roar. I spent some time over the last while putting together publications, doing a number of witnessing gigs within the regulatory process. Some incredible projects are out there. People are willing to spend, on the last one I witnessed for was $20 billion, excuse me, for transmission line, interregional transmission line through the US Midwest. The things that I'm most interested in, I've just listed them on the page there, really speak to what do we think that we're going to be doing in terms of the next steps here. And the next steps are very important to me. Having some conversations with some of you last night, it's like, well, how do we balance this whole thing around the reliability of the power system and the costs? And we've heard a lot of people speak about cost today. A lot of people have popped some good ideas out there. Because of my background, I'm a little bit cautious. And so I like the innovation. I've been part of the innovation. But one of the things I'm very interested in is, oops, wrong direction, is to how to keep this thread going. I want people to show up at Alberta Innovates with an idea in hand that we can do something with. And so the last gig is the one that I'm at right now, 8 months into Alberta Innovates. Here's a little bit about us. It's about a 100-year-old company. It's had many different names as it's been in its inception. 1912, I think, is when it first started. And there's a number of locations within Alberta meant to service slightly different things for each of the ecosystems that we're funding. We've got 2 subsidiary companies, CFER and Innotech. They act as more of a, I would say, operational arm. They've got labs, so if you need to try an idea out. The guy's following me. I wasn't sure what was going on here. If you need a lab to be able to put together a plan, we can do that for you. Operating budget's about $250 million, which sounds like a lot of money. It goes fast because we've got lots of great ideas that we're trying to fund. We are conveners, connectors, partners, collaborators, funders. Anybody who's been there knows that. The thing that we really want to push is getting people in the door. Here are the 5 major priorities that we work on. I'm in the clean tech section. We bring in a number of ideas of which wind and solar used to be the thing. They're kind of passé now. We like to see it. We like to see the renewable. We like to see the low carbon. I'm really pressing for going forward on getting new ideas in. How do we change planning processes? How do we look at new economic models? And a little closer. Now you can hear me. And the last item here is part of the conveners and the collaborators that we, functions that we do are within consortiums. And one that was set up prior to me showing up at Alberta Innovates, I've now taken the flag for it, is the Alberta Smart Grid Consortium. And the consortium has a really awesome role in terms of mission and vision, in terms of bringing the system through grid modernization, through practical means in a coordinated way to make the transition work a little bit better. I'll just hang there and look forward to talking with you folks later on.
Thank you very much, Rob. We'll hopefully have some time for questions at the end after all 4. So if you could hold any questions. Next, Todd, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Todd Sayers, and probably have the easiest introduction of the day because I just get to say I work with Evan. So follow up with Evan for all you innovators that want to know more about us. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Center for Innovation and Clean Energy. So we've been around 3 years, not long, and we were created by founding membership in both levels of government here in BC, Canada, NRCan, as well as Shell Canada. And our founding members saw that there wasn't enough momentum happening in this ecosystem for early stage innovators. And as much as there's a lot happening in traditional energy investments, we needed to propel, especially this BC ecosystem, which is really unique and rich, but also look regionally as well as to how we can get traction on some of the best decarbonization ideas. So that's how we were founded. We're a team of 10. We're based in Vancouver, but we are out and about like this as well, because we like to understand what people are working on as one of our methods of intake. But we really focus on investing in 4 key areas. So one of them is low carbon hydrogen. So through a bit of the hydrogen hype or bubble right now, and really we still do believe that key industrial processes and transportation will have a home for hydrogen in the future. How we can de-risk some of that, and there's a lot happening in BC, but regionally as well. We work with Alberta Innovates a bit. How we can de-risk some of those early stage investments on a path to, from seed to Series A, kind of that momentum, that first valley of death. That's what we're really here to do. In low carbon fuels, we really look at the wealth of feedstock in BC and how we can either understand the economics of transportation for that, or conversion technologies and end use adoption for next gen biofuels and eventually synthetic fuels. So again, the solutions that are a decade out, but how can we start de-risking those now and get them paired with industry to continue to learn? The other areas we invest in is carbon management. So you heard Evan reference that. And in the carbon management space, we really look across the value chain of what's the opportunity for nature-based solutions, which BC and regionally we have a lot of options, hybrid as well as engineered solutions in that space. So we've looked at measuring and monitoring and verification of some of those solutions. So how can we actually make assurance to that voluntary carbon market that exists today around the permanence of some of those solutions in sequestering that carbon. But we're also more trying to look at how we de-risk the CDR overall and what the opportunity is for Canada in that space. And then the piece we're here today to talk about, really our 4th area, is battery and energy storage. And as much as we know the large customer in the province of the utility of hydro and what they can scale, but I'm really keen to understand what else is happening in communities with First Nations for different energy storage innovations or applications to really help decarbonize. That's what we're here in position to do. And as part of what we're trying to build through those investments, we have the portfolio snapshot here that just kind of shows where we're at after a couple of years. But the most interesting thing when I talk to innovators is this isn't their first idea. It's not their second idea. It is often their 3rd and 4th idea. And that tells about the richness of the entrepreneur ecosystem that we're all participating in. We need to do more to support those innovators. So we're of the view, 50% of the technologies to get us to net zero are there. We just need to let them come down the cost curve. The other 50% we need to identify. So some of the winners we picked today aren't ultimately going to be where we get to, but we're going to learn. We're going to develop skilled professionals that are going to help identify the next one, and that's really what connects our small team in Vancouver on a daily basis. Really proud that for every $1 we invest, 7 is following us now. So the credibility of where CIC chooses to place those grant or non-dilutive dollars right now, super proud about, as well as the Indigenous participation that's growing out of our portfolio as well, proud about. So I'll leave you with one example, and then I'll stop before I get the hook. So Evan talked about Moment in the energy storage space. The other one I'll talk about is Atlas Power Technologies, based out of Burnaby. So think of a regional approach. A company that we helped write one of the first checks to developing a novel supercapacitor that is actually de-risking energy transmission company or generation companies in Alberta, right? So there's many different solutions to get to energy addition, which is the theme coming out of Climate Week that I heard. I wasn't there. And we're trying to figure out how can we de-risk the leading ones that can direct decarbonization impact.
You guys are really good at sticking to time. You're very good at sticking to time. I don't even have to yank you. But one quick question. I think Evan mentioned it, but you guys don't just fund and support BC companies, is it?
Yeah, criteria, good one.
Not criteria, just geographic location.
So BC companies, but also projects in BC. So the company itself doesn't have to be in BC as long as there's a BC impact.
Great, thank you. Haley.
Hi, everyone. My name's Haley J. Bush. I'm Partnerships Manager with Innovate Calgary at the Energy Transition Center. We actually have a company in common. Acona works out of the Energy Transition Center. For those of you that aren't familiar with Innovate Calgary, this is an organization that was founded with the intent to commercialize and support innovation and research and development coming out of the university labs. Fast forward about 40 years, we have 5 innovation hubs and 6 new venture funds. I always forget how many. Maybe more relevant to us today is the Energy Transition Center, where we have a variety of services, including mentoring and advisory. We have subsidized office and lab space for startup companies. We offer graduate student internships to companies that need some support validating and de-risking in their commercialization journey. As well as our events and event center, I like to think of it as a bit of a catalyst in the innovation ecosystem. For the early stage venture funds, USEED, Innovate Calgary has the USEED funds. These are philanthropic funds that invest in very early stage companies, pre-seed, seed stage, $50,000 to $300,000 check sizes. And I'll also mention the Innovation Catalyst Grant. This is a program to support founders coming out of the universities developing a hard tech. It's essentially $250,000 funding over 2 years to support that development and commercialization process. Thank you. I'm under time.
You guys are very good and very succinct. Okay, we'll hopefully have some time for questions. Graham.
So firstly, can everyone understand my strange accent? I'll try to speak properly. So my name's Graham Edge. As you can probably tell, I'm not from Canada. So I grew up in the north of Scotland. I moved to Calgary 17 years ago. My background was originally in executive search, so doing a lot of work in oil and gas and power and utilities. And then in 2016, I had this kind of early midlife crisis. I was feeling pretty frustrated and thinking, I'm not sure I want to recruit oil and gas executives for the rest of my life. And I got it in my head that I was going to start an energy transition-focused executive search firm. So I made the decision, because I had no network in that space, that I was going to go to Europe and attend a number of events. And one of the events that I attended was in late 2016, and Richard Branson, the founder of Virgin, was speaking at the event. And I met all these incredible entrepreneurs who were working in the energy space, doing cool stuff in food, doing amazing stuff in water. And what I realized was these individuals had never really interacted with other parts of the energy value chain. So I was flying back to Calgary, and I was thinking a lot about this event and all these amazing people that I'd met. And I thought on the flight, this should be an event or an initiative that brings together these innovators with the incumbent players in energy. What if I put the disruptors in the same room as the incumbents? So my wife and I decided that we were going to cash in our pensions and our RSPs, and we were going to self-fund the idea. So Energy Disruptors today is the largest energy transition event in Canada. We have 3,000 attendees. And really, the way to think about Energy Disruptors is it's this place where oil and gas hangs out with renewables, people from electric mobility, people from the world of power, people from the arts and creative sectors, individuals who are doing interesting stuff from a finance perspective. It's really thinking about the entire energy value chain for molecules and for electrons in one room together. We have live music and artistic performances. And really what we're trying to do is break down those barriers. And the reason we're doing this is we're trying to kind of scale innovations and solutions from all these different groups. And we believe that a lot of us are kind of hanging out in our own echo chambers. And by breaking down these barriers, we're going to be able to scale up innovations and solutions.
Thank you. Can I come to the next one? Can I come to your next event?
You're all invited to the next event.
We're all invited. Your closest 100 of your 3,000 friends, right?
Let's do it. Yeah, October 21st and 22nd, Calgary next year.
Next year. Oh, we've passed. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you all. That was super interesting. Thank you for being on time. So I'm going to ask a question, the same question to all of you, and it's sort of two-pronged. So my question is, what is the one most important ingredient for scaling innovation successfully, aside from money, aside from capital, which we all know? So what's the one most important ingredient? And tied to it for Robin, Haley, and Todd is maybe what are you looking for when you're investing or funding someone to make sure that they will be successful? So it's sort of a two-pronged-ish question about what is the one most important ingredient for success that you also look for when you're funding or investing in someone. And you don't have to talk about the funding part, but. So let's just go Todd, Haley, Graham, Rob.
So what the problem definition is, so what your innovation or solution is really trying to solve, and how ground tested that has been with your potential end customer or first customer. Often we see kind of brilliance in entrepreneurs without that line of sight to the market validation, because ultimately we can come up with a lot of great ideas, but if no one needs them, it's not enough to evolve technology. We need to have these technologies implemented for industry and other parts of the value chain to scale, because that's how we get to decarbonization impact. So really we're trying to look for how clear is the problem definition of your investment case of what your solution is. And if it's not, that's okay too, because that's what organizations like CICE and there's Foresight, there's other energy disruptors as well, as having all those perspectives help shape that so you can be successful at the next turn. And that's really what we see, as far as we see a lot of, sometimes people are ready for investment now. We have a lot in our portfolio that have been like their second and third time have gotten successful investment, right? So it's that kind of clarity that we're looking for.
And that they've done their homework,
Yeah.
their research, they understand the need or their value proposition, right?
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Haley?
That's a great point. I think like the most obvious thing is we need innovators, but let's take that a little bit deeper. And what I really look for in innovators is an ability to listen to feedback, to be adaptable, to be flexible. You're going to take feedback in all sorts of ways. I look at innovation like experimentation, like put forward a hypothesis, test it, validate it, and then put forward your next hypothesis. So it's an iterative loop.
Great point, thank you. Graham?
Yeah, so we've worked with some incredible founders. So we've done 4 summits in the last 6 years, and we would have had several thousand founders attend the summit. And then in my day job, so I recruit leadership teams and executives into mainly scale-up companies who are doing cool stuff in energy transition. And the ones that make it, I think that at the heart, there's this deep resilience. And if you're going to go and try and scale an energy or climate solution or a clean tech solution into the marketplace, it's not like building the next Skip the Dishes or a new app. It's not, I'm going to go and launch this, and then 2 or 3 or 5 years later, I'm going to go and exit. Normally, there's some sort of hardware component, or you're going into a customer base where they're risk adverse, and it's an extremely slow sales cycle. So this ability to kind of, we would call it munching glass, where you've got to be able to chew a lot of glass if you're going to commercialize a solution at scale in the energy and climate world. The number one criteria for me is innovators who are super resilient and can chew a lot of glass.
Is that a Scottish expression, munching on glass?
Do you know, it's something, and he's not very popular at the moment, but Elon Musk has talked about this with chewing glass. Yeah.
And that's really interesting. It's almost the flip side of flexibility, or not flip side, but they're so, to me, they're really linked. Being resilient, keep going, learning, innovating.
And I'll give one personal example, like super personal example. Probably I'm going to be oversharing. But when we were doing our first summit, we did it in May of 2018. As I mentioned, we self-funded it. And I remember we were about 4 months out from the event. And at that point, we were staring down a personal loss of about $600,000. And it's the first time in my life where I felt like the walls are closing in. And I remember my wife, Michelle, who's my co-founder, Our kids at the time were 1 and 3, and she was trying to pay for groceries at the, at Co-op. $180 of groceries. There's a line backing up, and she's going through her credit cards, and they're all bouncing. And so I'm not saying you necessarily need to take it to that extreme, but I'm not going to suggest that whatsoever, because that's fucking stressful. But I do think that you got to be wired a bit differently to be. And by the way, this doesn't just go for entrepreneurs. If you're at a big company and you're trying to do something innovative, and I think we conflate innovation with incremental improvement. I know Haley just talked about that, but if you're really trying to push the boundaries, you're naturally going to piss people off, and you're naturally going to face a lot of resistance. And so having that deep tenacity, that deep belief to kind of drive an idea forward, this is something else that I think is really, really important.
Well, we're talking about disruptors. So thank you for sharing that. I really understand the munching on glass, because when you talked about that, my stomach dropped and I felt like I was munching on glass. So thank you for sharing that. Rob?
A little disconnected, but that's exactly the type of person I was talking about a few moments ago. When someone walks in, and the resilience side, that's a nice way to frame it up. To be able to know that you've got an idea that is resilient, and more than just innovative. And these are the types of things where you step out and find in our American friends, the Amazons, the Apples, things that have been maybe there before, but then commercialized in a very particular way, engaged with a certain set of criteria, which are not common, in ways that haven't been combined before. And these types of things end up in a way that, of course, that's what the wheel completely makes sense 5,000 years in. At the time, it was radical. It was absolutely edgy. And these types of things, when people take, and maybe it's that push up to the next level when you do put your own money on the line, that you do get those types of critical, I would say, responses to say it's a make or break day. And I can't imagine it's good for the heart pressure. But it's one of those things that just moves us up a notch. It's not a slow, gradual incline, it's a step change. And those step changes, I know for myself, are what we need in the energy transition right now. So when someone comes up to me and says, what's the most important thing? It's the ability to see that plan in your mind, and in there, you may not even be able to say, there's a commercialization plan, there's a market plan. It's just that idea, that big idea that sets you apart from everybody else that's doing that particular thing in a way that's never been done before, using a set of counterintuitive criteria.
Thank you. And being bold sounds like what you're saying too, right?
Yeah.
Having that clear idea, being bold and getting it done. Being bold, flexible, resilient, and really knowing your market. So really 4 different bang-on responses. Thank you very much. So now the panel, each panelist is going to pick someone else and ask them a question. So let's start with Todd. You ask your question to whoever, and then Haley, then Graham, then Rob.
Not to freeform here, but I would just want to emphasize some of those points on our last round there through. So it's the resilience that is so important for innovators and for innovators to be supported on, right? So it's one thing to believe in your plan, and this is what the team, part of the behavior and muscle we're building into the team at CIC is, that's great, you've believed in that plan, that's not how it's going to happen. And just to know that that's okay, and organizations like us, we're gonna be there as you work through that, and just so building that resilience through your problem definition or through your project proposal is so important, but just giving yourself space to know that that's not exactly how it's gonna happen, and that's okay, that's the innovation path. My question for Rob is, we need to not look at borders for innovation and decarbonization, and as much as our initial mandate is focused on BC and BC companies, we also look regionally for what our friends and colleagues in Alberta are doing, what's happening in the Pacific Northwest. So, and our organizations work a little bit together. So Rob, maybe for the innovators in the room and the rest of the ecosystem, what are some examples you've seen of kind of regional collaboration getting it right? And what else do you think we need to do to really be efficient as an ecosystem supporting innovators?
So thanks for the question. And for 8 months into Alberta Innovates, I won't have a lot of practical examples as to what this looks like. But the framework by which innovators or innovating funding organizations might find common ground on is regionality, one example. So although BC, for example, is different than Saskatchewan, there might be common funding criteria which says we want to decarbonize this particular product. It may not be exact because the temperature in BC on a seasonal basis is different than Saskatchewan. The way the transmission system is set up is different than BC. But there is, in a common, I would say, common regulatory structure, and I get it. There's balkanization right across the country. I mean, there was a huge celebration a couple of months ago when we managed to remove tariffs from wine passing back and forth between Alberta and BC. We can probably do better. But in that vein, it's a case of what commonalities might we find, let's say, looking at the transfer of green electrons, where it used to be black electrons or gray electrons. What would we put in place that would allow that through some kind of innovation that would speak to, I would say, a renewable paradigm. So we're going to put some more wind and solar in. We know we're going to get those called on within the province. However, during sale opportunities, we might be able to put that in as a value add. So maybe things along those lines. Did I capture the essence of your question?
Yeah, I think that's helpful. Yeah, hopefully helpful in the room, but look forward to comments or questions if not.
Thank you. Thank you for the question and for your response. Haley.
So originally my question is for you, Todd, but also listening to Graham talk about energy disruptors, I'd like to ask a two-pronged question.
Do we answer at the same time?
We can handle it. Yeah, do you want
Be truly disruptive.
So I've been in a lot of conversations recently about an opportunity that exists to engage industry more in supporting innovation. How do we get them more involved in pilot projects and demonstrations and things like that? We all know that industry is motivated to maintain status quo, but they're also uniquely positioned in the value chain and with their resources to help sort of drive forward and move the needle a little bit. So with your experiences working with industry, I'm wondering if there's any lessons learned or quick wins or just ideas in how we can help engage and collaborate better with industry.
Can I go on a rant about industry?
Rant.
So it's funny, isn't it? When you see innovation, you almost roll your eyes, don't you? Because there's an element of, what does that actually mean? And I think lots of people like to say that they're innovators. It's a bit like you've probably seen in LinkedIn right now. Everyone loves to be an AI expert in this day and age. You know, it's like this emerging trend. For me, one of the biggest things with industry is if you're a founder or if you're trying to work with industry, one of the things you need to determine really early is this client, is this customer actually truly trying to be innovative, or are they just window dressing and using the word innovative? And I think making that differentiation is really important because you can waste a huge amount of time with the wrong customers. So I think being really thoughtful about, is this a company, is this a customer that is truly trying to innovate, or is this a window dressing exercise? And sorry, I don't mean to like pour a bucket of cold water on this topic, but I do think that that's really critical. And we see too often companies waste a lot of time on these kind of internal initiatives that actually don't go anywhere, and you don't see anything truly innovative come out of it.
Yeah, to sort of build on that, I would agree, like really knowing how that industry partner is incentivized and to really directly like put that on the table. So there's, the second piece is to know exactly what you're gonna say when you get in the room, right? And so it's back to that problem a bit, and so is their innovation need clearly identified? And back to Graham, if it's not, then it's probably, what is your intention really in engaging innovators? And so,
I'm a teeny bit depressed with your answers.
Well, here's the other thing that happens, right? You need the right champions and stakeholders within those companies. So it depends what you're trying to do. So we all know there's, in certain companies, operations will dominate certain decisions, and operations doesn't get on with finance, that doesn't get on with supply chain. And you've almost got to have this dual strategy of bottom up and top down. So I'll give an example, which is maybe a little bit different, but when we were starting Energy Disruptors, none of our team had ever produced an event before. So in my incredible naivety, I thought, it's going to be dead easy to get sponsorship. This is a great idea. And 12 months in, we had no fucking sponsors. And, I shared that we were staring down a really big loss. And what I actually recognized was that unless I got the support of literally the CEO, I was never going to be able to land a major sponsorship. Because when it went to the marketing team, it was just viewed as like, what's the ROI? And when we had no track record, there was basically no ROI that we could demonstrate. So what we did was we basically said, if we could get the CEO excited, they would basically direct the marketing team to have to do the idea. And when I say sponsorships, I'm not talking about someone chucking you $5,000. It's almost like a charity thing to go away. These are like big 6-7 figure type partnerships. But it took us ages to figure that out. So my advice would be try to figure out where do the centers of power reside in the client. It's not necessarily always by job title. And then try to find 2 to 3 champions at different levels through the organization that can help you navigate those power dynamics within these larger customers.
Thank you for that. And Haley, do you want to just repeat your question for Todd?
No, I remember. No,
Okay.
I want to build some optimism back in. Some hope, some optimism. I agree with Graham, and it is using your network about who do I need to talk to really be efficient with your time and them, and we can plumb that to figure out who that is. I think, yeah, so that's part of it. What was my second thought? Yeah, right now I did. I'll have to come back to that.
Yeah,
We'll
feel
come
free to
back to
jump
that.
back in later. Let's move on to the next question. So, Graham, short, succinct question 2.
So, yeah, you said, can we talk about funding? Because my question's going to be about funding. So this is for Haley. So, Haley, if we could change one thing about the clean tech funding landscape in Canada, if you could wave a magic wand, what would it be? What would that change be?
That's a loaded question, but I think my answer is I think we need more early stage risk capital. I think it's feeding the top of the funnel. When companies get further along in their evolution and they have de-risked their project enough that investors are interested, I think that capital already exists. But nobody really wants to, it's kind of like almost a philosophical or counterintuitive thing because you have to accept a certain amount of failure. We know startups have a high rate of failure. So when we're investing in top of the funnel, we're really accepting failure in those investments, which is very difficult to do. Like it's counterintuitive. It doesn't make sense. But I think that's what it takes. So we have to embrace a culture of accepting failure and accepting risk. And I think you can't just throw money at the problem. You have to also implement other support services or, like mentorship, networking, maybe support with building pilots and the other components that are required, because just throwing capital at it, you're just going to end up with more poor quality companies. So.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point in terms of, here's the other thing, and we talked about this a little bit. It's not like you're investing in a new app with a quick return. You're investing in capital-intensive spaces with super long timelines. So maybe the other thing we need to do is get maybe a bit more realistic about what's involved when you're investing in energy and climate and clean tech. I'm sure a lot of you have been following the work that Bill Gates and Breakthrough Energy are doing. In some ways, that was the thesis behind Breakthrough Energy, is how do we fill this gap where this is slow to get the money back. If you're making the investments, it's super high risk and it's really capital intensive.
Thanks, Graham. And last question to Rob.
Sure. Now, just before I do that, I'd like to just add into the conversation here. is in the power system. And I mentioned this yesterday, depending on how you do the math, and this is really dependent on the math. In the US, the utility system, generation, transmission, generation, is worth more than the space program and the military combined, depending on how you do the math, right? You know, what's a 5-year-old attack submarine worth on the resale market? I don't know. I hope it never gets to the resale market. But it's like the funding is huge, and the outcomes and the ramifications are dramatic. And so if we implement something on the system and it's not quite right and vetted, even though it is hugely innovative, but we don't put it through the proper scaling system to get it in place, the outcome is unbelievably bad for us. And it could be that we have a whole bunch of it in place before we realize what's going on. So anyway, I just wanted to add that into the conversation because that's part of, I think, the commentary here. So my question for Graham is, a little bit of background. We're now doing a tremendous amount of decarbonization on the power system. And part of this decarbonization involves things, again, that we've never done before. So we're asking our innovative crowd to come in and say, how do we turn natural gas into electricity if we think that that's a good idea? Or how do we put hydrogen into the mix? To remove any of the potential downsides, what kind of guardrails are reasonable to put in place so that if decarbonization slows, or if we find that there's a fundamental hiccup, and Donald Rumsfeld, I'm not sure how many people know Donald Rumsfeld, he's the guy that repeated the quote, there are things we know, there are things we know we don't know, and that scary third one, there are things we don't know anything about. How do you think we should frame ourselves up to get ready for potentially an outcome in the decarbonization process that requires us to recover?
Thanks for the easy question, by the way. Jeez. I feel wholly unqualified to answer this. Can I talk about something else? No, I'm only joking. I'm joking. Okay. I mean, I actually think we're already seeing examples of this around the world where you're almost seeing this backlash against decarbonization and green efforts. So we've seen this in a number of elections recently in Europe. There's various polls where climate change is kind of dropping down the agenda of people. So I think actually one of the biggest things we have to do is how do we balance all this stuff? And how do we ensure societal approval as we go through this transformation? And we're talking about a transformation of the biggest engineering system in the world. Trillions of dollars of infrastructure. And I think one of the biggest risks is we always think about net new infrastructure. Like we're going to have to build everything new. And what was quite interesting this morning when we had the 4 presentations from the founders, you know, the first one, ConnectX, we're kind of talking about we've got this built environment and it's underutilized right now. And how can this actually impact whole systems change? I'll give one other example and project that I'm really excited about, which is maybe a good example of kind of big, bold ideas and reusing infrastructure. So, you know, we're all sat here talking about decentralized energy and renewables and all this exciting stuff. But the reality is that we've never used more coal production for power generation than we're using right now. We're at record levels of fossil production globally. So decarbonizing or removing coal from the mix globally is, you could argue that's priority number 1 from a decarbonization perspective, and it's a very uncomfortable truth. So there's a group out the US who are looking at how do we repurpose existing coal plants globally and retrofit these plants potentially with nuclear generation. You've got existing transmission lines, you've got existing infrastructure, these are brownfield sites. This would protect jobs at scale. If you could do this in a cost-effective manner, then you can kind of meet societal needs, you can achieve your decarbonization goals, and you can basically switch out coal for nuclear. So I think that we've got to come up with solutions that aren't just technically or economically feasible, that also has to be this important social, cultural, and human fabric if we're going to see these things achieved at scale and reduce the risk of a backlash from society.
Thanks, Graham.
Thanks, everyone, for those great questions and really thoughtful responses. And it just makes me think that wow, this is a huge topic that's getting bigger every minute that we're talking about it. But thank you for all that insight. We do have about 10 minutes for questions, actually. So take this opportunity to ask questions of these people. Okay, ready. We've already got a hand up. Because we've got these amazing leaders and of major organizations that can support your work. So come ask questions. Do we have extra mics?
All the mics are up there.
Okay. We'll share mics up here.
Sure.
I want to pick up where you've just left off, Graham. I think what you're really talking about is social innovation. And this is the context of innovation that we're not really paying much attention to. So we've heard story after story about technical innovation, financial innovation, business innovation. I think the heart of Gary Holden's story this morning was about social innovation. He was engaging the customers directly. He wasn't trying to go through the existing supply side infrastructure of the marketplace. And without education, and I think this was, the secret to his success in advancing Lodestone, they had a solution for actually helping people to understand how they stand to benefit from the innovation itself. And I don't see us doing that. It's almost like we marginalize the consumer, that, okay, our job is to supply you with power. It's not to enable you to supply yourselves. And that's a social innovation challenge. I welcome commentary from all of you on that. How important is it, do you think, going forward, and especially looking at the political implications, the social unrest that's unfolding? It is a backlash to the pace at which innovation has been unfolding and people being left behind.
Just for the sake of time, I'm going to ask one person to respond, and I'm going to ask Haley to respond to this, please. And if we have time, if there's no other questions, but I just want to make sure we have other questions as well.
I'm sorry, I don't think I caught the question.
I was looking for commentary about the importance of social innovation in helping to advance the whole innovation agenda. That we're focusing on the technical, the financial, the business innovation, but we're not paying a whole lot of attention to social innovation on the demand side of the marketplace. And that's why we're getting backlash, in my opinion.
So I don't know if I'm going to answer your question, but I'll try. But I kind of look at social innovation or social impact very similar to the way that we look at environmental priorities and focus areas. And for a long time, there's been a long debate about whether we should move these innovations and ideas forward if they don't make money. But I think you have to make them make economic sense. I think that's the whole point that Todd was raising earlier. Everybody thinks they have a great idea, but if you can't make it economically viable, it will never be adopted, and then it's not really a great idea. I don't know if that helps at all.
I mean, the other piece on innovation is, so don't be daunted by the pace that we're doing it. We need to do everything faster everywhere. But there will be step changes throughout this, right? And so we'll be there for the sawtooth. We can't, if you look backwards in time, we can't have predicted all of the monumental disruptions that have come to really get us on a path. So that's what, as innovators and organizations like CIC are there to kind of de-risk and help try to fuel those, right? Why Graham is pulling together a conversation to try to get that's the kind of empowerment around innovation that I get from being able to work in this space. But
I know Graham's dying to give him a response, but I just want to see if there's any other questions. Okay, sorry. So catch Graham. He's got lots to say on this, and I love that we're talking about other forms of innovation. Go ahead. Good job, Todd.
Hello, thank you for the panel. I've loved hearing you guys speak. So I am on an innovation journey, part of a startup right now. And one of the feedback that we've gotten from a lot of people is that, hey, what you guys are developing is going to be great for the US market. A lot of application in the US market, a lot of growth opportunity in the US market. So I just want to know from your guys' perspective, like what would be your counter to that, especially because you guys are in like specific spaces looking for those type of growth and investment opportunities. And so how would you kind of like counter that to be like, no, like Canada has a lot of potential and a lot of opportunity as well. So.
Can you introduce yourself and direct that question to one person, please?
So I'm Taba Sabi, CEO and co-founder of Splice and Connect. We will be doing a pitch tomorrow. So I would love to actually hear from either from your perspective and also from Alberta Innovates, because you guys are like investing into these type of projects. Thanks.
If you make
Thank-
it quick, Todd, we'll
thank
get
you.
Rob too.
Okay, thank you for the question while I'm returning to the stage. Yeah, the US is always going to have more funding. We shouldn't be daunted by that. There's still funding in Canada for the right ideas, and the ecosystem will pull together to make sure that happens. So BDC, like there's a lot of organizations, including ours, that can put capital solutions together for the right idea. There is a large sucking sound, obviously, with the amount of funding down there. That's not going to change, but that should not daunt us from coming up with and trying to stand up the best companies we can here in Canada for our own local decarbonization, but also for that technology and those solutions to be exported.
Well said, BCer. Go ahead.
Completely, there's space. There's space all over the world for innovation. Innovation that works in the US may or may not work in Canada, and I've watched people try to swap innovation across boundaries that don't always make sense. So a really good idea is sometimes fit for purpose for a particular area. For example, the energy imbalance market in California, where they're actually giving money to sell energy negative at one point. Get that. You're selling energy by taking negative dollars. That solution only worked in California, across to Oregon and across to Arizona, would not work anywhere else. Innovation for decarbonization in Canada, where it gets quite cold, natural gas decarbonization to electricity may make sense, or hydrogen. That may not make sense anywhere else. And so innovation really does respect the places where it's going to be placed and implemented.
Thank you very much. We actually have 1 minute, so Graham, you can respond to the previous question or this question.
Oh my God, I can't. Well, okay, so back to the social innovation piece. I actually think it's about how do you capture the imagination of the customer. And so much of it is about how you create a compelling story. So again, I'll see amazing founders, super technical, engineering degrees up the wazoo, really impressive people. But at its heart, it's about we have to replace one story with another more compelling story. And this is something we had Yuval Noah Harari, the renowned historian and author of Sapiens, spoke at our summit 3 weeks ago. And this was something that he was talking about, is if you're going to do something at scale, if you're going to scale an innovation at scale, that has to be such a compelling story to be able to do that. And so thinking about how we storytell, how we capture the imagination of society and the customer, I think is, hopefully that helps to answer the question.
Okay, we're not asking another question, sorry. That sounded like it was going to another question. I'm going to cut us off here. And love this ending on storytelling, how important it is to make sure we're disrupting on the social level as well as the technology level. So I'd like you to join me to thank our panelists.